July 8th was no exception. It was titled Activate Your Human Nature. I was so moved by it that I reached out to him and I said, can we please talk about this somewhere? And luckily he agreed. So I'm going to go find him now and bring him.
Hey,
Hi, brother. Welcome
how's it
back.
going?
Oh, it's going well. I'm so happy to see you here.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Your July 8th email is why we're here.
Right.
It was titled Activate Your Human Nature. And it starts like this. I'm just going to read the first couple of lines and then we can sort of get into it together. When you're feeling down and anger starts to take over your mind and actions, it makes it much easier for others to react to you with anger, which instantly tips me off because I've had a lot of really interesting interactions lately on many subjects. Similarly, you continue, if you're deep in your vulnerability and expressing it honestly, others will have an opening to respond with compassion and understanding. Um, you go on to say that emotions usually attract similar emotions. I think this is medicine for us right now. Talk to me about just sort of flesh that out for us. And then there's more to go through this email that I want to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I've been noticing, and it actually that whole piece came up with a conversation between me and my wife Sarah, and we were talking about how when someone expresses vulnerability during a difficult situation, especially if like there was an argument or something, but that vulnerability normally, I'm not saying always, but normally has a disarming quality where the other person, because they no longer feel in like they're in a fight, like they're no longer being
Yes.
attacked, that
Yes.
vulnerability is normally felt. And then what's given back to that is a form of compassion or even more vulnerability from the other person. But if you take the opposite situation and you have someone responding with anger, normally the other person will return anger to that same situation. So it's not always that case, it depends on what's happening and what's happening inside each individual. But for a lot of people, yeah, similar emotions attract similar emotions.
The teaching being that if you find yourself in an interaction where there's a lot of volatility,
Hmm.
can you, as a person who has worked on themselves and healing themselves, can you actually bring a level of compassion, kindness, empathy, softness, vulnerability to the conversation and hopefully devolve it backwards
Yeah, yeah,
into.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And that's like the higher like task, the higher lesson for people who have been working on their emotional maturity is like, how am I going to act in this situation when someone is confronting me with a lot of tension? Like, am I going to give more attention to the situation and just make it worse? Or am I going to like figure out how I can maneuver this so that I can remain authentic within myself and also protect myself, but at the same time, like, do I need to respond to this volatility? Do I need to just end this conversation, or is there a way that I can bring my peace and my patience into it and hopefully, be the bigger person in the situation and resolve it?
I think there's a level of neutrality that your work has taught me in my personal interactions.
Hmm.
Especially now, there's as everybody's well aware, there's this big divide amongst us. And I learned this with Ali last night. I was talking to her, Ali Bogart. She's like, just bring neutrality to it. She reminded me, bring a neutral zone, and it always helps.
Yeah, yeah.
Always
And
helps.
that's something that I try to do too, as well as like I try, because it's so easy to be defaulted in survival mode. And that's why, when I was writing about those similar emotions, that's why I brought that piece of human nature versus human habit into it, because normally, those emotions of anger, fear, craving, those sort of um, kind of like what you may get on the surface level of a human being, like what
Mm,
their conditioned behavior is, that's
mm,
built around survival, it's built around defensiveness. It's like, you know, evolutionarily designed, but also it emerges from childhood. And that's what we're, it makes sense that we're set up in this way, but that's not ultimately who we are, especially if you think about, if you ever ask yourself, like, what is my mind like when it's deconditioned, when it no longer has trauma, when it no longer is full of all this old pain that I'm carrying? What are my emotions going to be like? What's my state? What does my perspective look like?
Wow. The reference that you're making to the second part of this blog, we're still in number 1 of the 3 thoughts on July 8th. The higher work of someone who has deepened their healing and cultivated their emotional maturity is not getting pulled into unnecessary arguments when someone else is trying to spread their tension. I would even add unconsciously. With mental patience and agility, you can override your survival instinct of reacting to their tension with your own. When you use your self-awareness to override your survival instinct, you are saying no to human habit. This is what you're saying no to human habit and yes to your human nature. Human habit is the fear, hatred, selfishness, craving dominated thinking. And also mental patterns that function as a defense mechanism that solidify during hard times and then begin to spread into everyday life. But
Right.
from the base of human nature, you say, this is the best part, it is easier to be gentle. It is easier to see more perspectives. It is easier to express love. It is easier to be more creative, and it is easier to have compassion and understanding while still being able to defend yourself if necessary.
Right. And that's the powerful part too, where a lot of people think of peace as something that's passive, but if you're trying to live from a place where you're interacting with the present moment, and if you're moving into the present moment, then that means you're trying to activate your real human nature, because oftentimes that human habit is coming from a place of the past. But even in the present moment, you can still use that information of the past that will help you defend yourself, but that information won't be commanding you. It won't be governing your actions. It won't be controlling you. It'll just be there to inform you as a possibility, as a potential, but you'll see more pathways that you can take in your mind than just repeating what happened in the past over and over again. So if you think about love, the possibilities of love are really endless. You can create so many beautiful things. You can take so many serious actions or even hard actions and accomplish whatever it is that you need to accomplish while still protecting yourself and while still being compassionate and loving to others. So there's a way to hold these multitudes in your mind without, being overly simplistic, like I can only be defensive, or I can only be loving, or I can only be gentle. No, you can be so many things at once. But if you have this sort of like foundation of love, then from that can spring so many more possibilities than if you had a foundation of defensiveness that you were acting from.
And that foundation of love is derived primarily, in my vision of you, from your practice.
Yeah.
And I like to repeat that over and over because I think it's very important for anyone watching here. If you're watching and you're thinking, okay, so how do I come from a foundation of love if my entire life is built on a pile of shit?
Yeah.
And the truth is, actually, the practice helps us see what you outlined in number 2. Number 2, how do you deal with your down moments? This is a clear reflection of how much you've grown. Down moments don't stop coming, but your reaction to them can decrease substantially when you take your healing seriously. This also lit me up. Taking our healing seriously. What does that look like for you, and where did this come from in your own experience?
Well, I mean, for me, taking my healing seriously is like I meditate 2 hours a day, every day. And I've been doing that for about 7 years now. And it's been a consistent practice where, these 2 hours that I give myself, they're like pillars of my day. I start the day, I woke up this morning, just sat up in bed and started meditating. And then I, move about my day. And then at some point before I go to sleep, I'll meditate for another hour. So it seems like a lot of time, but it's funny. Like my life has been pretty busy these days, but even with meditating 2 hours a day, I still find time to waste, so there's ample time in the day. It just depends on like what is my real priority? And like for me, my priority is my healing and my liberation. So I tend to it like a garden. It needs to be tended, it needs to be nourished and fed, and in turn that'll ultimately feed me in the good times and in the tough times. But something that's come to, like, especially over the summer, like if you want to really cultivate happiness and mental stability and mental clarity, like these are things you have to cultivate. These are things that you have to teach yourself. Things you have to um, learn through repetition, right? Like people are always like, well, how do you stop reacting? It's really difficult. How do you start responding? It takes intentional practice. You have to intentionally, slow down those movements before they become actions, and pay attention to your mind. And it's all really difficult in the beginning, and it's still difficult with practice, but it becomes easier over time. And it's something that, like, you're just, it's like running a marathon. You're not just going to run a marathon. You have to train. You have to teach yourself. You're not just going to overnight learn a new language. The same thing with cultivating positive mental qualities that support you in living a good life. You have to cultivate these qualities through repetition. So whether that is through, going through therapy and following the practices that your therapist may give you after your therapy sessions, or if you have a mindfulness practice or a breathwork practice or a serious meditation practice, like all of these things are intentional methods of cultivation, where you're like cultivating specific qualities of equanimity, of not being constantly reactive, of trying to observe things objectively, of trying to observe things with honesty. So I think one thing is, like, we have to stop trying to find the fast and easy way to happiness, because if someone's trying to sell you a fast and easy way to happiness, it's not good. That's not true. Like you're just what's that saying? Like they're selling you snake oil. Like if they show you a way that's like, oh yeah, this is going to be difficult, but in time you'll cultivate real qualities that will help you, then sure, that sounds a lot more sound.
You talk in this number 2 in this blog about realizing how much your perception influences how you feel,
Mm.
and how you react to how you feel is also influenced by your perception. You say that if you want to live a life of peace, it's critical to develop 3 things: mental clarity, mental agility, and mental patience. I feel like if you were to say, okay, let's define equanimity, all 3 of these would be subsumed into the
Mm-hmm.
definition of that word. But mental clarity, mental agility, and mental patience. I like this because we're so focused on heart and body. And we are constantly saying, okay, you don't need to pay attention to your intellect. That's not important. Set that to the side. I like the idea of cultivating mental qualities on purpose in the service of our healing. Speak a little bit to that internal revolution that you talk about.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny because I love the way that we all sort of um, enter into this like space of healing from different avenues. Like some people
Yeah.
are so heart focused, body focused, and it's funny because like in the meditation, the Vipassana the tradition that I'm a part of, we're very body focused. Like we're observing the body, feeling its impermanence, and through that we're learning. But it's, through the observation of the body, you get so many insights into how the mind works. Um, and something that's become clear is like it's valuable to like try to tease out these things. So like for me, mental clarity is like trying to do your best to observe things objectively, and not just, because you can notice that, like, if you felt something in the past and a similar situation arises, then you'll feel that same thing over and over again. So you're constantly just filtering whatever you're encountering with this lens of the past. So once you're aware of that, you can actually start very intentionally taking this moment for what it is. It's something that Jiddu Krishnamurti would write about a lot, where he would say, can you just watch what's happening? And that's it. The only thing that you're supposed to do, just watch, just take it in without imposing anything on it. And, he would write and verbalize that, but then when you try to do it within your own mind, it's difficult at first, but over time it's like, okay, let me just listen when I'm listening to a friend or listening to my partner tell her story. Like, let me just take in what's happening. And something like that can be incredibly valuable. And all, those other things, what was mental agility, what
Mental
were the
clarity, mental
mental,
agility, mental
mm.
patience.
So agility feels like once you see the different things that are happening in your mind, being able to choose between them. Like, can I, go from this area to that area, like
Right.
in my mind? And it's like, okay, I see my past, but you know what? I'm actually going to choose an action that is more authentic to what I'm trying to do now. And a lot of people may have thought in the past, like, okay, doing what's raw and what I initially feel, that's me being authentic. Oh no, that's you being your past self. When you take a moment to really feel what's happening and you're like, okay, that's how I would have behaved, either as a child or as a teenager or as a young adult because of these difficult circumstances. But right now I'm trying to cultivate a new version of myself that is much more aligned with who I want to be and is going to help me be happier and have more rich connections. So let me bring this person forward. And that's, you having much more mental agility. Yeah.
Wow. And the mental patience aspect of it is the part that I think most aligns for me with the healing revolution, the healing, internal healing revolution that is happening inside of each of us at all times. Mental patience allows us to, as you say, kind of intentionally let go
Mm-hmm.
of what the past felt like and actually just patiently observe, listen, and respond.
Totally, totally. And you could even take it as well in terms of, the long game of you cultivating these habits and just having the patience to like see yourself make mistakes,
Yeah.
see yourself, plant these seeds and then tend to them and then watch them grow. And because it really, it's a long journey. It's a long journey. Like you can spend a lifetime healing specific traumas and it just, yeah, there's just so much inside of the mind. It's incredible when you start really observing it.
You say specifically at the end of number 2, healing is not just a static process of letting go, but one of repetition,
Mm-hmm.
where you build the mental qualities that you need to support your happiness over and over again.
Right, right.
But it doesn't just happen once.
No, not at all. And it's funny because especially with the idea of human habit, you may think to yourself that your human nature will be like, automatically uncovered and it's beautiful. But what you do get when you uncover your human nature and you start sort of removing all that conditioning, that old human habit that would get in the way and would make a lot of decisions for you, is that you get, and sorry, I'm using a lot of these metaphors with like seeds and all of that because I've been like tending to my garden all summer. So this is like what my mind has been in. But you will get these like young little seeds. Like you'll have love, you'll have compassion, you'll have your ability to understand perspectives outside of your own. But then you also have to cultivate them. You have to like really spend time. And even the Buddha would have these teachings called the Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes, where you can feel more compassion, more equanimity, more selfless joy for other people's successes, and more compassion. But there were ways to cultivate these things. So these are natural abodes that you can access, but at the same time, like they're there within a pristine mind, but you can take them to a much higher level if you spend time intentionally repeating them.
It's like any other practice. You have to actually
Yeah.
practice hanging out there
Yeah.
and doing the thing
Mm-hmm.
so that it gets more natural. Third
Mm-hmm.
point in the email, finally. Again, if you're just joining us, we're on Diego's July 8th email. If you don't get his email, please definitely sign up. It blows my mind every single week. It's called Activate Your Human Nature. Number 3, a key aspect of emotional maturity is making healthy sacrifices that support your long-term well-being
That's yeah.
more than your short-term pleasure. This is how I stopped smoking weed, actually. This is how I walked away from
Me
my
too. Me too.
that was exactly how.
Yeah.
Um, you give time to your healing even when it's hard. You make space for rejuvenating connections even when your craving wants to pull you back into old connections that you know are unhealthy for you.
Mm-hmm.
You embrace the repetition of good habits even when it feels like they are building up slowly. You do the courageous work of keeping your heart open because you know that's the only way to have deep and meaningful interactions. You try to take in the present moment with a fresh perspective that isn't being constantly evaluated by what's happened to you in the past. And here is the italicized point. More than anything, you give yourself what you need instead of what you crave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough one because a lot of things I think shift, and you have to sort of do these really kind of positive surrendering and these sacrifices that you have to make to be able to build your emotional maturity, because in those types of situations you just need to spend more time with yourself. And now that doesn't mean that you're going to become a monk or be totally secluded or anything like that, but you're going to be more intentional about what you give your time to within yourself and with other people. Um, and it's difficult work because you do have to make that sacrifice. And it's funny that you brought up the weed aspect, right? Because I was talking with a friend just yesterday. The reason that I stopped smoking was because I wanted to do a 20-day meditation course. And one of the requirements was that you have to, be totally, have taken no intoxicants for a whole year. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I didn't have a problem with weed or anything. Like, I would smoke it and I would feel like it served me sometimes, other times no. Like the relationship felt a little like, did I really need this? But then when I saw that, I was like, you know what, I do want to take a longer meditation course. But then there are these requirements, and those requirements are there because when you spend those, you go to those longer retreats, you're trying to develop a whole new level of mental stability. Like you're trying to go to a whole, like another type of depth that is so subtle that, filling your mind with intoxicants just makes your mind a little denser and won't help you reach that depth of insight that you could if you had a much more just like cleaner mind. So I was like, sure. I was like, let me go into this experiment and see what it would be like. And I've never turned back since, because when I let myself, I was like, you know what, let me do this because, okay, this will cost me my short-term pleasure, but in the long term, I should do this experiment because I don't want to be reliant on this if I don't need it. And I also want to, see what happens when I take my mind to a new depth in these longer courses. And it was huge. It was a sacrifice that ended up having immense returns for my benefit.
Yeah. And we all notice in your work, we all notice the clarity within ourselves. The magic of you having stopped is that you got clear enough to tap into what is utterly universal through what is utterly personal for you.
Right. Yeah. And I always say the same, like there's nothing special about, right, like the same human nature that I have in my mind, you have in your mind, and everybody else does too. And the way that creativity and love, the way it bubbles up and manifests itself in your life will be, dependent on your own like personality and your characteristics. So like my wife, she's a scientist, and she is just like an incredible problem solver. Like she's not an artist, she's not a writer, but if you would look at her solve problems, like, like either interpersonal or like scientific problems, I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is amazingly creative, but that's her tapping into her own human nature, and that's the way it manifests in her life. And I see that with friends who are like lawyers or designers or, just do different aspects, but there's so much that you can have access to when you actually do your healing work and you decondition your mind and you sort of put yourself through that like rebirth revival process where you're like, okay, like let me live again.
Yes. The last point that you make, treating your energy like a precious resource has a deep effect on your life. Saying no becomes more common, so you can focus on your time and give it to your highest goals. You miss out on some events because you don't need as much external stimulation to feel fulfilled. This is definitely happening to me right now. Your fulfillment is now more derived from your self-care and the wholeness that is uncovered from your healing work. We
Yeah,
all need to hear this.
It's felt, especially in my personal life, it's felt very nourishing to do that personal work, and then start a new relationship with my mom, start a new relationship with my dad. with my brother and sister. And then, I used to go out all the time, especially before I started meditating, and I still go out and, go to social events and do things and have friends. But everything is much more intentional now because I know that I need my energy. Like I need my energy for my like personal growth, and I have these particular goals in terms of like where I want to, like not where I want to be, but like what I want to feel like when I'm, when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm 60. And I know that cultivating that relationship with myself and spending time alone and spending time with a few people and keeping a tight circle, that's what I call it in my mind. Like I try to keep a tight circle these days. It's been everything. I mean, I see that same thing happening with the people around me who are also really serious about their liberation and their healing.
Yes. If you wish to, I would love to hear a little bit about what's coming, the next project that we mentioned in our text thread.
Yeah. So yeah, I have so I just released Clarity and Connection, which is a book
Amazing.
that I'm like, I'm so glad that it's finally out there because I love Inward, my first book, but Clarity and Connection is like, um, I love it. Like I'm really, really glad with the way it's come out, and I'm glad that it's supporting people really well and they're really enjoying it. Um, but I do have another book that I'm working on that there it is. I have another book that I doesn't have a title, is not finished, but is around this topic of human habit versus human nature, which I'm pretty excited about. And it'll be out sometime in 2022, but I'm excited for that. And there's one thing I wanted to mention too, Elena. I know that journaling has gotten massively popular, and it's such a good way to be introspective. But if you like don't have a journal, like I highly recommend Elena's journals. Like especially Practice You was just like huge. It was my wife and I love Practice You so much, and then I will leave out my copy of Practice You, and then friends will come over and they'll pick it up and they'll start like like coloring in it, answering questions, and I know Being You is also out. I actually don't have a copy yet, which I
I'm
should
sending
get.
you one today.
Um, but if you need a good journal, like Elena makes the most beautiful artistic journals that are just like, they're incredibly elegant, but you're going to want to use them and just like write so much in them. So I highly recommend those.
I appreciate you greatly, brother. This was really about you and your work today. Um, Last thought, I wanted to read the very last sentence of this blog. You give more time to your rest so that you can prosper while you are in the midst of your journey. Emotionally mature people are kind and gentle towards others, but they give the highest priority to what helps them thrive.
Right, right. And that's that classic idea that, I can't be there for you if I'm not there for myself. Like, if I want to be a pillar of equanimity in your life, especially while things are difficult, and be there as support for my family members, my friends, or whomever, I need to take care of myself. Like I need to take care of myself really well, and I need to cultivate these qualities that will help me, you know, be nourished so that I can potentially support you through your troubled times. So that's why, you have to, and it's not selfishness at all. It's just playing a smart game. Just play smart, take care of yourself, nourish yourself, find a technique that helps you just grow and flourish. And you'll find that all these positive qualities that you develop for your personal life, they'll actually spread, and you'll enrich the lives of those around you as well. And it's not about perfection. No one here is perfect. Like Elena and I aren't perfect. We make mistakes all the time, but we take our healing seriously, and hopefully we may inspire some people there too.
Yes. Make sure you're getting the Young Pueblo newsletter because it is as full of gems as both of his books. Make sure you get clarity and connection and stay close because we will stay close and let you know when his third book is out. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elena, and thank you all who are watching. So kind of you to hold space.
Love you. Thank you.
Love you too.
Give my love to Sarah too.
Definitely. My love to your family as well.
Bye.
Ciao.